My husband gave me my first camera. I took nothing but black and white photographs with that. The portraits really did speak to me. I wanted to capture the soul. I'm Beverly Parker, and I'm a photographer. I can't really pinpoint the year that this interest peaked, but when I was a stay-at-home mom and when my youngest child went into kindergarten, that's when I decided that I was going to get organized as far as what I wanted to do with my photography career. I went back to Austin Peay to finish my degree, and at the same time I started my photography business. They were two things that were quite ambitious on my part. I decided to go to the art department because I knew that the art department had one of the best photography departments in the state. And by the way, there was no automatic focusing either. It was all manual. And to this day, every camera that I have is on manual. Every image I owned. I didn't have to depend on something inside that camera telling me what to do. That's made me a better photographer. That made me a better artist. Often I wonder, how did I get from there to here? At Austin Peay, the portrait work is what spoke to me, especially the environmental portraits where I would photograph someone in his or her environment. Actually, that's some of the best black and white work that I've done in my life was while I was doing coursework at Austin Peay. I am so glad that I learned the f-stops, the shutter speeds, the depth of field, because after I fulfilled those requirements, I was able to start working independently. And that's when I picked up the alternative processes. The Polaroid Transfers, that was my first endeavor with the Polaroid system. You take the photograph, it pops out of the camera. You cut the end off of that Polaroid film and you pull it apart and slap that negative down on the damp watercolor paper and brayer it, carefully pull it up, and there is this beautiful saturated painterly image there, and it stays that size. I loved it. Today it's still my very favorite part of Polaroid. After the Polaroid Transfers, it was time zero, still a Polaroid process. I remember going to Riverview Cemetery quite a bit because some of those monuments out there are beautiful and they lended themselves to this particular process. I would take a picture of, say, a monument. It would shoot out from the camera. I would bring it back to my car. I had my tools already there waiting for me, which included golf tees, scissors, toothpicks, anything that had a point that wasn't so sharp that would puncture that emulsion. But I would put the Polaroid transfer down on a hard surface and work the emulsion, and it was very pliable and it would just go where I wanted to do. So actually what I was doing was drawing on that particular image. If it were an image of a monument or a tombstone, I would go around the details of that particular stone. It was new, and I wanted to try everything new that was coming down the pike with Polaroid film. I've exhibited at the Downtown Artists Co-op, and actually I'm a co-founder. Susan Brown and I co-founded the Downtown Artists Co-op. And I've exhibited there quite a bit. I've exhibited at F&M Bank, at Legends Bank, at Planters Bank. With my Polaroid Transfers, I actually exhibited in Cincinnati. And the title of it was Transferred in Cincinnati. With the co-op, since I am a co-founder, I seldom ever have an entire exhibit by myself. I want the new people to have that. But the exhibit here at Customs House, you don't know how honored I was when Terry asked me to do that. I was anxious. It was a daunting thing for me at first, and I really had to get my thoughts collected on this. When I came in that day and I saw what was lying ahead of me, I said, Terry, I feel like I'm in a New York gallery. This is just marvelous. I'm thrilled that the drag racing exhibit is there, because the ones that didn't care anything about my exhibit, who came to see the car exhibit, came into my exhibit, and vice versa. And so that was a nice combination there. The images that I chose were the alternative processes, to include the Polaroid Transfers, the Polaroid Manipulations, Lith, and Brome Oil. The Brome Oil alternative process is the only one that I ever do anymore, and that's mainly because I stockpile my chemistry for that, and then I still have my photography paper. This was always my go-to paper, whether it was alternative or regular shooting, and it's the Agfolk 118 fiber-based paper. It's just my favorite. It all begins with your negative that is in my enlarger here, and my paper, and then exposing the paper. The image that actually comes out is going to wind up almost black. You would think, oh, I ruined it. But that's part of this Brome Oil process. So you put them in a pan of a tray of water, and you let them soak for about 15 minutes. Once they've soaked, then I already have prepared my chemistry in trays. My chemistry for Brome Oil involves potassium bromide. There are three. This is the second one, copper sulfate. And it's in a crystal form too. So that has to sit in water for a while until those crystals dissolve. The other one is potassium dichromate. This is in a tiny crystal form. So the potassium dichromate is mixed with water, and as these other three are, and that makes that stock solution. Once the images that I've just exposed in the enlarger have been washing now, I take them out and put them in the three trays that I've already made up of this stock solution. Then the magic starts happening, and you'll notice that the black is going away. The image is coming to the surface of the paper. However, it doesn't stop. It keeps bleaching and bleaching and bleaching. That's the whole purpose of this chemistry. I have an example here of how a matrix actually looks when it's finished. And what this chemistry has done is to bleach the silver out of the paper. Well, there's gelatin and silver in this photography paper. That water is making the gelatin swell. And that's what's going to be my shadows in my finished Brome Oil print. Once this is bleached, then it has to be fixed with a fixer. And then it's washed again and dried. This is an extremely important step that I'm doing now. There can't be a drop of water left on this, or it's like oil mixed with water. It's not going to take. Well, I've just about finished taping this, and that serves two purposes. One, to mask the image, and then to keep the image from rolling around on the glass. I've already put just a small bit of the graphic chemical ink right here. It's a good consistency here. You want it very, very thick, and this is. Then I'm going to take my hard brayer here, and I'm going to start moving the ink around. I have quite a lot of ink that's on my brayer, so the next step is to take this over here, make another run of the ink. This is a process that is time-consuming, and you can't just put ink on here and say it's finished. It has to be layer after layer after layer. But now, with the hard brayer, I'm going to start inking. I'm going to switch now to the foam brush. This is the brayer that gives more of a photoreal look to a Brome Oil image. And you can see the image appearing here. Now I've just about done everything that I can do with the brayer. So now I'm going to put that aside and start with my brushes. You dip the brush into this ink that you've prepared over here. This is cut at an angle, and it's the front part that actually does the work. And I have such a variety of these brushes, you don't have to spend a lot of money. Sometimes I use a shaving brush. I'm going to switch now to this brush, and I'm going to work on cleaning out my highlights. It's so interesting seeing the highlights pop now. If I weren't satisfied with this and I needed to clean them out even more, I can wet this, it's a cosmetic sponge, and wet it and then go in and clean these out even more, the highlights, and it works wonders. I don't want to clean them out so much that I lose the detail. Now, this is as far as I can go with this one today. It doesn't look bad at all, but it needs to be darker and more saturated. And that is when I would come back with more ink and fill in those shadows. I enjoy using a variety of different colors. This is a mixture of ink. This is a mixture of the black and the red ink. I have one very similar to this in my exhibit I did at Customs House, and this is my daughter Elizabeth, and more people would come up to me and say, that's really not Elizabeth, is it? But this is the quality that you get by using a brush with it. It does have a very vintage look to it. I wanted this one to be rather sepia, and so this is primarily brown. So that's the Brome Oil. The bubble burst when Polaroid stopped making their film. And when I say that, they're still making it, but not for the purpose that I used them. I have talked to the people at Polaroid and they just say, I'm sorry, what we offer now can't be used for your alternative processes. So I enjoyed that while I could. With my Polaroid Manipulations, and they're the latest ones I've done, the original is about a 3x3. So I have to do something in order to get it large. So I have to scan the small images into my computer and then print whatever size that I want. With the manipulated Polaroids, which use an entirely different film, I still don't have the film, but I have hundreds of Polaroid manipulations that I can pick and choose from, creating another one. So none of my film is new. The only film that I can work with now are my Polaroid manipulation images. For instance, the trout over there, that's an example of piecing together old Polaroid images that I have to make one.
Right.
And without the Polaroid film anymore that I use for this purpose, that's what I have to do. So that's an example of just recycling. You can see what the subject is, and so many of mine depict something in Clarksville. And I found that that's what people were interested in. It's flat, you can't make it three-dimensional. However, by layering it like this, I got my message across about the rivers and the cornfields and the bean fields and the railroad trestle and the skyline. So it's still flat, it's still 2D,
but layered.
Yes, it's there. That's one of the things I can usually count on, the color, the saturated color in the Polaroid manipulations. I seldom ever use Photoshop to enhance very much at all, because I want it to stay kind of like it is. It gives me so much freedom, and I honestly, I never know really what's going to come out.
But that's kind of the fun, and that's what makes them so individualized. You know, it can never be duplicated.
I really like to do what nobody else has done. So it may be in perspective, it may be a point of view, but I don't want to be like everybody else. My youngest child, John, was into kindergarten, so I had a little bit more free time. When I would take him to a professional photographer to have his portrait made, I would take my props with me. So you can imagine what the professional photographer thought about my coming in when he saw my props. I knew what I wanted in portraits, and it was different from what I had seen in Clarksville. So that's when I thought, I'm going to go out on my own. I had my dark room in my laundry room at the house. Well, finally I decided that to remodel the hayloft of my barn, and I did, and I had that converted into my studio space and my darkroom space. I used John so much in my work. He was my guinea pig. I would dress him up and he wouldn't complain at all. The name of my business was Beverly Parker Photography. I keep it simple. Most people think of artists being right-brained, and that's correct. When I started my photography business, I had to learn how to use my left brain. I belonged to the Professional Photographers of America and the Tennessee Professional Photographers, and they offered all sorts of workshops on how to enhance a business. I listened, and I found out about how I could make my business grow, and at the end produce a beautiful product, but then be able to be paid for it too. I credit Professional Photographers of America for a lot of how I chose things the way I did. I offered family portraits, babies, children, or occasionally I would do a head and shoulder shot for a bank person or faculty or the Montgomery County judges and high school seniors primarily. My seniors were so much fun. They were on their best behavior when they came. Each one was an individual, each one was different. I never advertised. It was just word of mouth and they came. I've had people ask me if people ever lived in the LBL. They're the people that need to know the story. I grew up in the land between the lakes. I like to say the land between the rivers. Most people say the land between the lakes, but the rivers were there before the lakes were. There were two floodings, a mere 20 years apart. The early part of 1940s, when the Tennessee River was flooded for Kentucky Lake, and then in the early 1960s, when the Cumberland River was flooded to make way for the Barkley Lake. And that was what impacted me and my family. Flooding was such an issue back then. In the spring, the rains would come and flood crops, flood towns, where people had to actually vacate towns. When the government started telling everybody that the Tennessee River was going to be flooded, some believed it, some didn't. But in the end, everybody had to leave. There were cemeteries that had to be moved from a floodplain. The relatives were told, if you want us to move these, then we'll move them. But if they weren't told, then the graves remained there. There are at least 4 cemeteries in the south end of the LBL that have these remains. The way that I identify the lettering that's on the monument, I always try to take flour with me. And I use that flour, and I press that flour up in the engravings, and then the names just pop, and the dates pop. Eudora Welty is one of my favorite Southern writers. One of her quotes is, "Life doesn't stand still, even in a place that humans are not there anymore." One of the most poignant images I have ever taken in my life was just a few days ago. And I had known about this for 2 or 3 years, but had never seen it firsthand. You can only get to this place by boat, and it's in Tennessee River / Kentucky Lake. When the water is very low, this tiny island rises from the depths of the channel like the Phoenix. And I was able to go out there a few days ago. And as you're approaching this tiny island, this white fixture, obelisk, comes into view. That's a tombstone, a monument that is still out in that tiny island that's only visible a short time of the entire year. And you're looking and it's getting closer and closer. And I'm thinking, this boat has to get within distance that I can get out of the boat and get on the island. If not, I will get out of the boat and swim if I have to. We reached the tiny island. I got out of the boat and went over. The name on the monument is John Young Whaley. So we know what his full name is. We knew when he was born and when he died, and then my friend found out that his 2 babies are buried there too. That probably is the most poignant story I have to tell about a tombstone or a monument, but oh, there are so many more. that need to be told. The person that helps me so much in documenting all of this, her name is Susan Witzoski. She's known far and wide as Ski. But Ski started writing a book. It's a supplement to the Land Between the Lakes Cemetery book that was written in 1982. We are doing genealogy on so many of these, and we're connecting cemetery to cemetery to cemetery. There are 5 rushing cemeteries. So they're all linked, and we're going to provide the information on how these are linked. There are 126 cemeteries in the south end of the LBL, and Ski and I have documented every one of them in 2 years, plus some that are in Kentucky. And also directions to get to the cemeteries are going to be in this revision too. I found beauty in every customer that ever came to my premises. There was something beautiful about every one of them. Once the people started coming, I was busier than I've ever been in my life. I was doing the photography. I was at Austin Peay full-time. I was a wife and I was a mother. And I would like to say that, you know, I pull that off. I don't know what my husband would say at times, but I would like to think that I pull that off. I never did do a lot of studio work. I preferred using ambient light outside. I never had many props at all. Nature provided my props. Ivy and trees and barns and flowers and things like that. When I started my photography business, I put myself in my customers' shoes. My product was unlike most every other photographer here, even though I had such good rapport with all of them. We were all good friends, but they offered something that I didn't offer. If it were a portrait, I wanted to capture the soul of that baby, or that mother with the baby, or that 3-year-old child. I have never, ever tried to get a huge smile from a child. I would rather have no smile than a fake smile. And I never, ever tried to say cheese, because that doesn't work. You get this. I still say that the hands and the feet of a baby on up till about 5 years old are absolutely phenomenal, because the hands and the feet do the same thing with that age group. I would be talking to a 3-year-old, and the way that the hand was placed, or sitting on a chair, automatically crossing his or her little feet. Perfect, bare feet. There's nothing any sweeter. But I would laugh and tell my customers the older they got, I didn't want to see their feet, because it's not about your feet. I want to capture your soul. Once the images came back, you know, they're priceless. Then the day came when I realized that I needed to change the course of my life. Now my life revolves around my grandchildren. That's my calling now, and I'm honored to be the grandmother to them.